going to go, and it's going to be a group effort. And the inspiration from this topic was actually an article I read in Chronicle of Higher Ed. I was like, this is great conversation narrative as far as like little things that we can do as educators in our class to, again, maximize our time with our students. And so the way this is going to go down is I have the suggestions from the article that I'm going to pass on to you. But before we do said things, I know that there are things that you do in your classroom that supports these small changes in teaching, and I think we can all benefit from hearing what we all do in order to maximize our time. So, engaging students through deeper connections, and I can't tell you how thrilled I was to listen to Dr. Usher this morning. You know, they don't send me, we only generally, at least this is the way the last two guest speakers have gone, just kind of give me a little overview of what their direction they're thinking. Like, you know, I can't say I need you to turn this in by, because I want them to have that academic freedom to maximize their message to you guys. But she talked a lot about connecting with your students and connecting your students to your content. And basically what this entire presentation is ways in which we can do so at certain little points in our class period. So we're going to talk about small changes that we can make as educators the minutes before class, the first 5 minutes of class, little ways to make connections with your students and the material that you're covering. The last 5 minutes of the day, and to be honest, this should be taken out. We're not going to give them a say today. I figured we can briefly talk about that, but I will say the presentation ends at the last 5 minutes, because this can kind of be a little touchy subject for faculty members about how much control you want to give your students. And I'll briefly mention, you know, giving them a power of choice is a great thing, but we'll belabor that in January maybe. You know, let's just deal with the minutes, and we'll worry about the other. So, do you all understand that engaging your students in your class is can be possibly the difference between them completing their degree and then dropping out completely? So when I say small changes in teaching, I'm talking little minute things that grabs the students and holds them in just a little bit longer. And so the other thing you need to think about is, like, there's been a lot of research done on student retention and student engagement, and they relate. They're related, okay? You're engaged, you're active, you're involved, you're interested, you're going to stick around. And so that's kind of what we want to be thinking about. Let me make sure. Yeah, that's all. So further impressed, I don't know if anybody else noticed this, yes, but she had the same daggone slide as I did. So let's talk about this. Small connections, and again, part of this I'm paraphrasing because the guy who wrote the article, which I'm going to introduce in just a minute, you know, why am I going to say it? I'm not going to say it any better. He says it really well. Small connections between course material and everyday life pop up all the time in almost any course that you teach. And these are the types of things we want to be thinking about. Reading the news, watching our screens, talking with peers, all of these things become moments of potential connection between your content and the students that you teach. Even so much as like walking in the grocery store. Something may happen that you're able to bring back to the classroom to relate your content to your students, and they completely understand because they themselves too have also been in the grocery store. So little connections like that are what can really join things together. And The thing is being experts in our field, we automatically see these connections because we're accustomed to doing so. And what we have to do when designing our instruction is recreate those connections for our students so that they then start connecting things on their own as well. Now, I want to point out that one of the major differences, and this was kind of alluded to in Dr. Usher's speak, one of the major differences between an expert and a novice is the number and density of the connections that we have as compared to the students. And so it allows us to take new experiences and weave them in tighter because our foundational knowledge of our subject matter is vast and great. Whereas our students may know all of this stuff, but it's disconnected, and therefore they don't have anything to weave their connections to, because they know grammar, they know the 5-point paper, they know, this literature thing, but they don't see how all three of those are interconnected. And so it's our job to take these little moments that we have with them and try to create that fine woven tapestry. So think about this. What potential problems could there exist in your classroom if you as the expert know all of these connections and though your students as novices may or may not? What potential problems besides not learning the content could occur by just the mere fact that they don't know what to do with the information that you're given? What could happen to your students at that point? Yeah, shut down. And then you're not reaching anybody. Okay. That was the right answer. Good job. Didn't have to leave that one at all. So, when your students are learning your content, either for the first time as a 100 level course or a more difficult concepts, like as a 500 more level course, all of these information and ideas that you're imparting upon them are basically sitting in this brain with no connection to anything. So always be on the lookout for times to connect. In the first place you want to look for connections. Oh, this is Dr. Lane. I forgot I told you I was going to introduce him. This guy, he's a professor of English at the director of Center for Teaching Excellence at Assumption. Anyway, he did this whole slew of articles on small changes in teaching, and he thinks just very simple changes in what we do and how we interact with our students can have a huge impact. Thank you. Your articles were great, Dr. Lane. I appreciate you. So, question, how can we intentionally create opportunities for our students to develop more connections? So what you're going to do right now is partner up, pair up, triple up, quadruple up, I don't care. Talk to somebody, all right? And spend a few minutes. Yeah, this is me in this.
It's very sensitive, that thing.
Well, and I've got bumbling. I don't really know. There we go. So take a few minutes, and this slide is for Becky Rowley. Because it has a cat on it. And I know she likes cats. See, I'm connecting with my student. I put a cat on it. That's right. So the minutes before class, take a few minutes with your buddy, plural, and talk about what is it that you guys do before class. How do you engage your students before class? Do you engage students before class? What actions are you doing before class starts? Ready?
By myself.
As a teacher, you're getting ready to have a class. You've got 3 to 4 minutes before class starts. What are you doing? Yes.
did not request it.
Well, and that, like I said, these small changes in teaching doesn't necessarily even have to be about the content. That's excellent. I've totally not thought about the teaching.
You also build relationships doing that. You know, because you find out from the student what their areas are, and that you can use to capitalize on how you instruct.
Exactly. Hey,
I have a gold mine in Grey's Anatomy.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. They all watch it. I watch it.
I may not be into like.
And tell me what's wrong with that.
They need a kid to talk with like, my daughters really like that show too, and I can't watch 5 seconds of it. Yeah, I don't know why. Anybody else have anything we want to share? This discussion has been, I guess, your right side, Debbie. Do we have any left sides over here that want to offer up? All right, she's silent.
We were just saying, maybe put a question up that is going to be kind of a main question about what we're talking about today. Kind of get them thinking about it. So when you approach it in class, they're not all staring at you for a few minutes. They have a chance to feel kind of mill over it.
Like acclimate themselves to what's about to ensue. Excellent. And that's funny that you said that because tip number 3.
I have found, when I do the in-seat teaching, I always chat informally with the students before the class. Because there's some who come in 15 minutes early. In doing that, I very quickly learn who doesn't want to chat and who does.
Right.
And it's a funny tension because they learn early on that as soon as I come in the room, they're not invisible. And then they can choose to walk out, or they can choose to stay. But not everybody is necessarily comfortable just chit-chatting with the professor.
Yeah.
And so having to cross that bridge sometimes is part of that negotiation that occurs there. And I never make the questions personal. I found there are some people that don't want to do a presentation.
Right. So those are all excellent points. Let me share a few with you. Well, it's from Dr. Lang. These weren't created by me, but I'm going to pass along. So tip number 1, how are you? It sounds like we're going around chit and chat. Speak to 1 to 2 students a day. You know, just small talk, kind of like what you're saying. If you're Sue, you're not asking them too personal questions. But that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, this is interesting. Display the framework. Somewhere on your board, just kind of write down what you're talking about. So that way they already kind of know, you know, what's happening, where their focus should be once you get done with the small talk. Now, I will say that in my tenure as a public school teacher, I hated the day's agenda because they forced you to do it in a specific way. If you were missing one daggone bullet point, then they came in for an observation, they take you down. And so therefore, I had kind of an adverse reaction to this. However, the way I used it was it actually kept me on track. So I'm not saying that you should go up and write all of your course objectives the date like, you know, in elementary school, but it would be helpful to remind the students of where they are. So you're keeping them connected to the day's agenda. And then the other thing that this does to take it a step further, and it goes back to the we are experts in our field versus they are not. As experts in our field, we already know how to categorize and classify our content information. These people are coming to our class without necessarily those skills to be able to know, you know, what pieces connect with each other. By displaying a visible agenda or writing up a couple of themes that you're going to do that day, that provides them some categorical guidance, and that could be very helpful for them. Let me make sure. And also, another point he pointed out was having those particular categories or agenda on the board can actually assist those who are poor note takers, because they're going to get distracted and they don't know what they're on, but you can just point them back here. Remember, we're talking about this, okay? Write that down. It goes under this heading. So, you know, we are training them on our content area, but we're training them how to study our content area. And so that is also pretty helpful. And then tip number 3, create wonder. So display an image, quote, or audio clip or artifact before class, kind of informal conversations about this. It could even carry over into the beginning of class. And what made him do this is there is an astronomy instructor. Basically, when you walked into his class every day, the NASA picture of the day, you could do your cats. Cat of the day. Cat of the day. The NASA picture of the day was the conversation starter. He had it up every day. Now, to me, that, you know, you're going to look at some really cool stuff. Now, as an English, I guess you could put like a picture of Shakespeare up there. It's not like a son of story.
I was going to say, though, last semester I took attendance through Socrata, and I would put on the board, or on Socrata, it would be kind of a random question, something kind of obscure. It might be like, what special holiday is being celebrated today in Japan, or something like that. And so then you're like, oh, they'd have to come up with something that they put up there, then they would talk with each other, and they might talk with me. And it showed that they had to be in class to know what the question was, or it could even be something like we started with, like, what color am I wearing today? You know, but just anything, it would get them, and it could seem random, but it could also put it in a context of how, a lot of we complain about kids today not knowing anything, not having any historical context, and I can put up what happened 40 years ago today in American history or something like that. And so then that got them talking, but they also used the technology, and I also got the attendance taken. Also, I got to see how many of them were probably clueless.
Right. Well, that's funny that you say that, because in this series of articles, I mean, that's pretty much what he's saying. He's like, guys, your students are clueless. Okay, we've got to show them where the connections are, or they're going to continue to remain clueless. So how can we take these few minutes throughout our class period and make sure that we're joining them with reality in our context? So this is good stuff. All right, so our next, that takes care of before class, all right? Now, why would it be important to consider the first 5 minutes of class? What can be accomplished here? And what did you do? So take a minute, generate ideas. First 5 minutes of class. What do you do? Well, number one, why is it important? Why is the first 5 minutes of class important? What can we accomplish during those first 5 minutes? And what do you do during those first 5 minutes? Ready, go. All right, let's share. First 5 minutes. Do we have anybody that would like to share what they do in the first 5 minutes? And why is it so important? Anybody want to share what they do in the first 5 minutes? Yes, ma'am.
Housekeeping.
Housekeeping.
Yeah, here's what's happening when I test, make sure everyone's on the same page with what's coming up in the course, when things are due, just like quick history and review last lecture.
Okay, excellent. Yeah.
You typically put up a top graphical outline on the board, pretty sequential, and then tell them this is what we're covering today. And then I try to, when looking at that top graphical outline, try to give them relevance to the concepts that they can relate to, and then I'll start lecturing.
Excellent. Excellent. That connection is crucial. Yes, ma'am.
Let's start with, here's what we're going to do today. And then take questions on anything from the prior day or the day before that. And the last 5 minutes are spent, I'm getting into this, but the last 5 minutes of class are spent going back over what we did. So we say it up front, we do it, and then we state it.
I think it's important to ask the students what did they get out of yesterday's information, and how can you connect that to what you're doing?
Because that also gives you an opportunity to take care of any misconceptions that they have. The one thing I do want to say about the first 5 minutes of class is, like, you only get that once. You only get that one time to grab their attention. So while I agree, and you don't have to do something great every day, the housekeeping is important, but then, what if one day you shook it up a little bit, getting to know you, or, do something to grab their attention, especially if you're getting ready to cover something that you know to be a troublesome area. You definitely want to make sure you've done something in the first 5 minutes of class to suck them into your side.
Well, also, and I think the first 5 minutes becomes critical with tardiness.
Yeah.
Because I really had an issue. Which I have 50 students in class. I feel like they're streaming in for as much as 20 minutes.
Oh my.
So I would, well, when you have a big class, I think students think they're sort of invisible, and I really wouldn't notice or know their name right off or something. So I started doing some of these little prompts that only lasted a few minutes in the beginning that they would turn in, that would be their attendance.
Mm-hmm.
So then somebody said to me later, like, you didn't take attendance, so we didn't sign anything? I said, oh, it was a prompt. It was in the first 5 minutes. It's not a make-upable thing. It was spontaneous. I don't say it like me, you can't make it up. Right. But it was a spontaneous thing. It's over, so that people would understand the first 5 minutes. They should be there.
Right, I agree. And I can see that being a problem. Now, nowhere in his little article did he say, most likely your people are strolling in 5 minutes. But that is the real
That's the real world.
It is the real world. But, maybe how you could curtail that, I guess what I would do is set those expectations early. Day one, have a prompt done. Day one, if you want to know when our next test is and our stuff is, you better be here in the first 5 minutes of class because I'm not going to go over it again. Set that precedent. So let's see what James had to say. Open with a question or two, then come back to it at the end. I think we just discussed that one. Sometimes it's good to have the question visible on the board throughout the whole time, so that you're connecting them and letting them know what where they are. That wherewithal, I think, is
One
what
of my
my
favorite things to do and to either have a case study at the end of the class, or then we're gonna start with the next class, or there's some questions there, we're gonna leave it here, let you think about it and ponder.
That's
And
really
then that
good.
gives them plenty of time to kind of talk amongst themselves on that class.
That's awesome. And then just build it, especially if it's a powerful, meaningful case study and topic, then that first 5 minutes, they're already back and mentally prepared to start learning. And that's the thing about the first 5 minutes of class. You have to, that's your time to get them focused and get them ready, prepared to learn what you've got ahead. And reminding them that we're here for clear purpose.
Well, I really like that idea because what that allows for is you get to see the way the students are thinking. And there are times, and it's happened to me a number of times, they make associations that we don't make, and it has caused me to look at that thing a little differently.
Right, that's
So I learned
absolutely.
from them.
So really, you could be catching the misconceptions, but you also could be catching, knowledge yourself on the topic and expanding. That's amazing. That's really good. All right, tip number 5. This testing effect has received a lot of ink lately. Basically, if we want to remember something, we have to practice remembering it. Now, he prefers the more technical term, retrieval practice. I actually like retrieval practice better because, some people just don't like the word yes, and I'm pretty sensitive to that. So anytime you can have your students remember things, remember content, and not using their computer, and not using their phones, not using their text, like retrieval, practicing retrieving that information. The first 5 minutes of class could be easily taken care of that. Just, hey, you remember that word for that? What's the definition of this? Just basic, lower level. We're not talking about critical thinking here, but we're just kind of greasing up the brain to be able to move forward during your content area. And in the meantime, practicing recalling those facts and foundational knowledge that you have to move forward. Now, the other thing you can have them do is have them remind you, well, what did we cover last week? I used to do that one all the time. Yeah, I knew what we covered. They didn't think I did. And have them, and make them be specific and present. Use your words, your content words, without notes or books or anything like that. So that's tip number 5. Tip number 6, we talked about this quite a bit this morning, activating prior knowledge. This is kind of the testing effect one step further. So in the testing effect of retrieval practice, we're really doing just, again, lower level information retrieval, vocabulary words, basic concept, transaction. But activating prior knowledge then takes all of those foundational content pieces and connects them to something that they already know, or connects it to an experience that they've had, or connects it to the latest media news that might be beneficial, like the Charlottesville thing, connecting to something that they already know about. And so, in some capacity, activating this prior knowledge in the first 5 minutes of class will help you do 2 things. It primes their brain for learning. Okay, we're greasing it up again, getting it warmed up. But it also shows you what if their prior knowledge is misconstrued. Then you can nip those problems in the bud, because what happens if you build on false prior knowledge? Your whole bottom's going to come out at one point, and then they're going to get frustrated, and then they're not only going to be late to your class, they probably aren't going to come anymore. So making sure that you have that foundational knowledge that's correct is really important. You don't want them to have faulty prior knowledge, especially in y'all's area. That would be disastrous. I don't want my nurses to have faulty prior knowledge. End of discussion. All right, tip number 7, write it down. All of the activities that we just discussed would easily could be written down on pen and paper. And I really liked what he said. He's all about don't limit your writing to just exams and papers, okay? Writing is another exercise where you have to think, to say something and to write it down, 2 totally different things, even if it is on the same subject. And I can only liken that to my dissertation experience. I could tell you about smart boards until I'm blue in the face, but to sit down and have to write academically about it is a whole nother ballgame than speaking. And so anytime that you can have, 5 minutes at the beginning of class, and you train your students. Class has begun, it's time to write, it's time to think. That may go a little bit further down into activating that prior knowledge than just sitting there talking about it. Yeah.
But you actually get it on a kind of central issue for me. The big wave now is to do PowerPoints, and I don't do it for that prime reason. I pretty much put up on the board what they need to know, and so I kind of suffer a little with course content because it takes longer to write it up. But the students tell me that allows them time for things to sink in instead of just reading it.
Right. Well, and one of the arguments that he's come across in his, or Dr. Layton's come across, is like faculty start freaking out about, I don't have 5 minutes in my class, or I'm not going to get through everything. I'm not talking like 5 minutes every day, like maybe once a week, just, shake it up a little bit, have them write. That keeps their interest,
I also use that, it's an entrance credit, I use it in college, critical summary report, where they have to come up with 2 things out of what they read, a quote, how it pertains to them, when they selected it, what questions they have. But one of the reasons they use it, not just to check that they read, but it's comfortable for them when we get in a conversation, when I say, Sarah, about what we read, if they have something, they don't have to go,
Right.
For that person who doesn't want to participate has this little paragraph here in front of them that they can talk about.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. That again, that forces them to sit and think through to be able to explain it in writing.
Briefly, though, they have to do it
briefly.
too.
And then it does allow, it's a confidence builder. You don't have to think of what to say because you've already written it down, kind of thing. That's a really good idea.
Have you noticed how students will take pictures of the board?
Oh, yes.
And I'm of 2 minds about that. One, I'm like, well, that's a lazy thing or something. Another, I have found that, especially back when I had Chinese students, they might write it down wrong, or what I said, they got it wrong. This way, at least they got it right.
Right.
So I don't know.
Well, I will say that my daughters do that, and I was kind of like, well, when you take a picture of people's heart, what up? We don't do that in this house. But no, they was actually taking pictures of notes and stuff, and they, when I watched them, I was really impressed. Like, they were using them to learn, so then I'm like, take as many pictures as you want. We're still learning, I'm okay with it. It's like, well, we took the scale and then I'll learn for it. That's where Mama Blue gets sick real good. This is my profession. Everybody's gonna learn. Exactly.
When I've gone to conferences, whenever the speakers have had really, really good slides up, it's really funny because all the faculty,
Are taking
we're all there doing the same thing.
Yeah.
slides that are, and we've got a few speakers who did some of that. So I thought I will take a few minutes for y'all to take pictures.
Right. I mean, again, I guess, you know, you've got your political parties, you've got your cell phone and classroom parties, you know, and never a twain shall meet. I'm definitely a cell phone component in class. I think it can be, if you're structuring their use, then they're okay. Now, if you're not structuring their use, no wonder you're having problems with them. That's not what I feel about it, but I find it very beneficial. So we're gonna move on. I think we're gonna get out of this a little early, which won't kill you. Okay, so let's talk about making connections. In what ways in your class, and we've already talked about this, I don't really know how much more we can do this. I already know what the answers are gonna be, but I'll give you a chance to surprise me. In what ways do you connect your students during class with your content? In what ways do you connect your content and the students during class? So starting at minute 6, what happens?
Asking them questions.
Asking them questions.
Using them in examples. Yeah.
Using what?
Using them personally in examples.
Using them in examples.
Case studies where they work on it together. Maybe a real life scenario.
Yeah, real life scenarios, working together. How else? I mean, we got some really
Like
creative.
small group discussions, and they feel more comfortable sharing, and then, you know, they can come together as a larger group and share
Right.
their ideas.
That's excellent. Yes.
I mean, illnesses, right? Lots of people are really interested to talk about their own personal diseases or what they have. Some people will share way too much. It tends to be the adults, especially in the email classes, they will just oh yeah, I had that thing with my liver. And everyone's had someone who has some sort of disease that relates to one of those symptoms we're talking about. And if no one offers it up, I'll my husband had this surgery with these stem cells in his knee. And, we can talk about their personal health. It's very personal to everyone.
I got that beat. This girl stood up one time right there in class, swore to God she had a tape on.
Oh my God.
What fun this is. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I'm so glad I'm not sitting in your class. KPD, what's that?
We were talking about the lesbian gay community, and during class, and this was close to almost in the class, our end of the 16 weeks, pregnant ladies said, I am gay. And they ended up holding each other in class. But my point with that was they felt comfortable enough with the people in the class to divulge that.
Right.
Because when you would see them on campus, they weren't doing none of that. And I would have never suspected.
Well, John, Dr. Lang offers, I think I got 3 here. And then we'll end up at the last 5 minutes. I really I had read about and heard about the Commonplace book just from my K through 12. I don't know where, some history class, I'm sure I learned that, but I remember it. But I started reading about it, and I guess basically it's like a scrapbook of stuff, of information that people used to put their prayers in. What else did he say we did? Treasured quotes, recipes. So it's like a journal / scrapbook, diary. You can ask your students to keep a Commonplace book and journal, and they can do it on their own time, and you can have them bring it to class and share. You have incredible digital ways to do this, okay? They don't have to carry around a notebook. They can blog. You can go and check their blogs. You can use your discussion forum. But basically, what this is doing is it's connecting your content, not during class, because that's when you're connecting content, But they need to be able to try to do that on their own too. And the commonplace book is a really good strategy. You can, once or twice a semester, have them bring it and for 10 minutes at the end of class, write or share some of the connections that they've made on their own and in their own way. That's kind of what this is. It's like handing it over. Okay, here, this is how we connect. This is what we're going to connect. This is, as a teacher, this is what you're going to connect it to. And then they go and try to connect it and then come back and you're able to see if they really did or not. So some things you can do here, ask them like, what's the most important thing they've learned? Why does it matter to them? Why does it matter to society? List one way in which course content manifests itself on campus or in your own lives. Again, you're connecting it to them, not content to content, but content to student and their lives. You can do the TV show, where did you see this system in Grey's Anatomy season 7, that sort of thing. So commonplace book I thought was an interesting, I actually kind of keep one just on my own, and I didn't realize it had like this official name. And at one point there were books written about how to write in your commonplace book. I said, whoa, all right. That's pretty interesting. Okay, so again, you can always connect with them social media. In my opinion, Twitter is probably one of the best ways to do that. You can have them, if you assign your lecture a hashtag, which I'd love to see Delphina do this one. They can tweet about you and add that hashtag. If you're like saying something super cool in class, they can.
Listen, I talk about my kids in class, and the repercussion of that is they want to date.
But this guy said, I don't know how you can manage this as far as like giving them grades. To me, I think it would just be something you could encourage. He was like, have them post once or twice a week on a social media site with a link to something that's current in your field or applicable, but to go and check all that.
That's what your Storify is for.
Yeah, I guess your
That's what your
Storify.
Storify is for, because you can gather your social media connections into one Storify, and that makes it easier for the teachers.
Yeah, I would have to do that. Anyway, so he said here, this isn't anything big. You don't have to do it all the time, but maybe just once, try to connect with them socially. And tip 10. The minute thesis. Padlet would be good for this, where you have different categories. He was an English teacher, so basically he had the main themes. Of his stories throughout the whole semester, and then he had the authors and the stories. And what he first had them do was kind of rote retrieval practice, match the theme to the story and the author, but then he had them connect one theme with 2 stories and started building connections that way, and then that ended up being the basis for a lot of their research papers that semester. So if you have certain themes or areas of concentration within your own subject matter, how can you connect between your chapters? Is basically what he was going for there. I don't really know why he named it the minute thesis. I still don't know, because that's not at all what I just explained. But that idea in itself is a really good idea. I thought that was pretty genuine. Let me make sure. Yeah, that's about all for that one. All right. Last 5 minutes. All right, so right? So here's like, I couldn't agree more with Dr. Lay in this one, but usually faculty members view the last few minutes of class as an opportunity to cram 8 more points in or say
No.
3 more things that just happened, or call out as many reminders for deadlines as possible. But at the same time, we are complaining that the students are packing up their bags. But what is the message we are saying at that point? Class is over, let me get this out. But what are we saying at this point? Class is over. That's why they're packing up. So why are we surprised if we're sitting here going, oh, and they're packing up? Because that our behavior is actually promoting that behavior. So we're actually still trying to teach at that point. Not very effectively, to be honest. But we are. And our students, they might be sitting there, but where are their brains? They checked out. Yeah, they're gone. Okay? So paying attention to your last 5 minutes of class and not doing that could possibly lead towards a more successful conclusion for learning of that day. So basically what he says is, let's not let the clock dictate us. Let's let the logical nature of the course dictate when class ends. Now that's not to say that we can't keep them longer. I know that's not an option, but by planning out that last 5 minutes, we are controlling that time, not time controlling our class. And so what are some of the ways that we can handle the last 5 minutes of class, knowing that we're not going to be screaming 8 things out and 5 test announcements? So what are some strategies we can use? Yeah, there's some right there, but what about yours?
I usually get out the credit and have them do some questions.
Yeah.
And that helps to kind of build some connections. And then, they're usually really interested in those questions.
Right.
And so they usually don't, that's usually I find that they're a couple minutes later in the book's ready.
Right. So involving them in some sort of checkup at the end of the class to make sure they understand what other ideas? How else do we end class here at Midway?
My favorite end of class activity is for the classes that are actual content classes and not lab classes is, what's the final exam question from today? And I make them actually write a question that would be the important salient facts of that lecture, and then I use them. And they're usually a lot harder than anything that I would have written.
Yes, ma'am.
Not all the time, but sometimes if I have a short video, it may not be the last 5, maybe the last 10 minutes, that reviews what we've just done, or if we've been on like a 2-day span of a topic, to do that at the very end. So they're hearing or seeing something different.
Right.
But getting it more condensed, and then I can say, okay, now you've seen it, it's also on Moodle.
Right.
And because I stopped trusting that they were going to go to the middle and find it. So it helps to review in a different way.
Well, I also think it helps for them to hear somebody else besides
Yeah.
us speaking. So it's like, I'm not lying to you. This really has happened. So,
I said it earlier, I like to restate the take home because I do very little direct instructions. I tend to do a lot of group work, take pictures and things like that. And sometimes they get so caught up in the big shares with each other, they forget what the main take home of the day was.
Right.
So we say it at the beginning, we do our stuff, and we say it again at the end. And
and hopefully it works.
that's why there's time for formative assessments.
Right.
After the first 5-minute check.
Right.
Guys, tell me what you're still confused about.
That's right. So we do want to make sure 3, 2, 1. You just have it's kind of like the muddiest point last year, just on a little sheet of paper. You can have your students say 3 new things they learned, 2 things that surprise them, 1 they still have a question about. This is stolen directly, this was actually stolen from library instruction. And during the last session, you guys were meeting back for closing remarks and that sort of thing, you will actually be doing a 3-2-1 for us. We will be sending out a formal workshop evaluation next week, but this will be more of an informal 3-2-1, and then you'll get to see what it looks like. And I may even put one in your folder somewhere. All right, so now closing connections. All right, so at the end of class, it's a really good idea to make sure you're going back and telling them, hey, you needed to learn about this disease because it's in the real world. Look at this example. I don't know where those diseases are, but you guys would know. You see what I'm saying? So that last 5 minutes, it's really helpful if you can connect what you taught them, that what they're going to be using when they graduate, so that it's real to them and they understand the importance of going home and doing their homework. And you can even do this like on Fridays. At Fridays, you don't have to do this every day, but on Fridays, that week's worth of content, how can they take it over the weekend and apply it to their real world situation? Kind of a recap of this week, this is what we learned, this is where you'll use it, and even if you're a gen ed student, you're still going to need to know tolerance of equity. I guess. I mean, I don't know.
I do.
Well, I agree. But you see what I'm saying? And this is why. And then you tell them a real world example. Now, the other thing you can have them do is if you want them to interact with this, rather than just closing and connecting and sending them on their way, you can have them come back and over the weekend write on the discussion board. Make sure over the weekend you list one time that you see this content out in the real world somewhere, and you can use Padlet. There's all kinds of things, but you don't have. They can still be engaged in this conversation, and it doesn't have to stop after class is over. All right. Okay. I think this might be the last one. So, I've said this before, and Ellen, Dr. Usher, the first Ellen that talked to you about pedagogy today, said it too, in that we're dealing with novices, per se. And so, we already know how to think about our subject matter. We've been trained to do that, and we've been doing it for quite some time. Our students don't know how to learn our subject matter, but they need to become aware of it. Like we can coach them all we want, but ultimately, who has to do the learning here, people? The students, okay? So, imagine what a difference we can make as a faculty, because let's say one student has at least 3 of you right now. Right? Right, sitting right here, maybe. Okay, so if we as faculty took 5 minutes, even just a few times during the semester, and taught our students how to be aware of what they know and what they don't, and that would be your metacognitive 5 minutes. Okay, hey, are you sure you know this? How? Just little questions like that, making sure that they're aware of what they are learning. He did a thing. What he did a little experiment with his class. He said, before the midterm, I asked students to take 2 minutes and write down for me how they studied for this test. When I compared what they said with the exam scores, the evidence couldn't have been clearer. Low-performing students used phrases like, reviewed my notes. I reread the poems. The students who aced the exam said things like, I wrote an outline, I rewrote my notes, I organized the timeline, I tested myself. So that's something you may want to consider doing. Because if they're not studying it, they may really like your subject, but they may not be studying it in the right way. And how they study it and where they categorize it, we take that for granted because we know our subject matter. He also made a slide after the midterm. They took the names out, but showed them the discrepancies so that everybody understood, okay, maybe I need to interact with my literature a little bit more than looking at my notes. So that's a really good idea. I thought it was awesome. All right, and then this slide is dedicated to Sue Lasky. Revisit the first 5 minutes at the end of class. We've already talked about that one. You do want to make sure, like, if you write up questions on your board, make sure they all have been answered. And if not, tell them why. You know, we'll come back to this next time, sort of thing. That's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Do you feel pedagogically motivated?
All right, that's all from the center today. Your last session is advising.